Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Hipster Podcast. This is your host, the Crypto Hipster, Jamil Hassan, where I bring you founders, entrepreneurs, executives, thought leaders, artists, musicians, you name it, all over the world in crypto and blockchain. And today and the summer season, I am bringing to you a new compilation episode. Last year, from seasons 1, 2, and 3, I brought you the Crypto Hipsters Chronicles. And now, from season 4 and 5, without further ado, I bring you the Crypto Hipsters Mysticals. And what that is, what it was last year, and what it is this year, it's a compilation. It's a compilation of 3 or 4 podcasts together as like a montage. And on a certain topic or area of interest in crypto and blockchain, pulling from my podcasts. And now, as we're heading into the summer of 2023, I bring to you the Crypto Hipsters Mysticals. And there's going to be 22 or 23 or 24 around their episodes. And I look forward to you looking forward to it. So thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you for enjoying my podcasts. And this is going to be a summer treat for everybody. So please sit back, enjoy, and let me know your thoughts. This is episode 4 of the Crypto Hipsters Mysticals with your host, Jamil Hassan. The title of this episode is The Future of Crypto Platforms, Infrastructure, and Decentralized Autonomous Organizations, with guests Nishchal, Gaba, who's the Chief Marketing Officer at DeFi Edge. Next is Christian Niedermueller, who is the Chief Executive Officer at Blocktrade. And third is Nicolas Biagosch, who is the founder and Chief Executive Officer of Q Blockchain. Enjoy. Let me shift a little bit here, but not really. How can blockchain projects, not the retail user, but how can blockchain projects benefit from creating their own decentralized exchanges? And why might that be a solution to potentially to overreaching regulatory government agencies?
Yes, so I'll answer that in 2 parts. First, I think a lot of good news came around DeFi by the agencies a little bit, because these a lot of regulatory measures are already taken itself in a decentralized space. You are not suggesting the user, you are not pointing the user, you are not recommending a user to invest in a particular thing, you are not offering any kind of financial advice, and the funds are non-custodial, so they are safe. User can take it out anytime as well. It's just that you're offering a service. So that actually natively itself, DeFi answers a lot of regulatory questions that might be the case as well. And then, we have already added measures for information, analytics, terms and conditions, informatics, tooltips, a lot of things to help the user guide the process and try to safeguard him from anything, right? But at the end, it's his decision, right? If you want to buy a coin and you're very convinced about it, it's there, but no misinformation should come through the platform itself. That's one thing. Now, how these projects, build the DeFi native projects can help from building these exchanges. One, because natively everybody wants to, have money investment and swap the coins itself. As part of the decentralized exchanges, as I said, a lot of freedom is needed, but there might be users who want long-term money, who has higher risk appetite. So there are different kind of things as well. Suppose you want to open your decentralized exchange tomorrow. If you can offer the users a little bit more freedom or a new mechanism, which is not usually available outside, right? There is always something missing. You can't just say, this is the perfect AMM, and then nobody should build on top of it anyways, right? This is not mature. And as the infrastructure changes, more, layers are coming. Cross-chain operability, for example, that's not something that's very up yet, right? If I just want to put in money in one exchange in Arbitrum and it's live, my contracts are live on Optimism as well, I should be very easily able to move the money within there, right? But usually bridges are taking the help of that. So there is a lot of work to be still done. So it definitely benefits one, but the protocols help, induce more transactions on a particular blockchain. For example, if I say, Binance, for example, Binance is very up on, how projects can contribute to the transactions. And that's naturally, good to measure the contribution that this protocol, for example, DeFi is helping create these many transactions. First, if you create a DAO and an exchange, you contribute to a chain's ecosystem, because any token, for example, a gaming token, or you can say any kind of lending project, they do want that token management, right? They want people to be able to buy and sell their token at a very safe place. Plus, they want their own treasury management as well. And that's where these centralized exchanges are the biggest place, and the market is very huge. It's not just that Uniswap has all the liquidity in the world. It's a leader, but others are still rising up. QuickSwap is there, PancakeSwap P3 is there as well, and they offer their own kind of mechanisms. It's a user's choice which it chooses, right? At the end of the day, you can just offer them the offerings. Now, how they can benefit is via the protocol fees plus the adoption as well, which they can bring in, right? Protocol fees, for example, QuickSwap charges a very small fees, right? It can be very minute, but it still is good for them to have that kind of a thing. And for example, for a project like us, DeFi, when we do ALO, we charge approximately, you can say 10%. The number varies by each protocol, but we charge a fees of 10% on profit for treasury management. So public strategies are totally free. We don't charge any fees usually, 0% management, 0% performance. If somebody else is managing, they might charge a small amount, but how we can benefit from that now is the protocol who wanted a better treasury and returns, they get that. We help them to market. So they are, getting more. And the ecosystem of the decentralized exchange is helping that protocol maintain its liquidity there, right? So even if they charge a small fees, that's revenue. But otherwise, they still have a strong community of building. And whoever gets listed on that exchange can be benefited as a protocol. For example, as I said, if a protocol is not listed on Uniswap V3 or a major DEX, you start wondering which too central, right? Is there is a chance my liquidity gets stuck. So that's where they can benefit as well. But still, I think a lot of work needs to be done in the revenue side of things for a protocol. Like it's heavy investment, but the returns are still, in terms of protocol earning a little less. For example, Uniswap has 0 protocols. They don't have any protocol fees at all. So they are not making revenue, but they're still leading the ecosystem. And then they can have other kind of ecosystem partners also that can be benefited, right, from monitoring. I'm not very sure about the internal details, but I think it's more about making the community stable, and it's too early to judge just in terms of revenue. Because if you see, there is still a lot of maturity coming around DeFi. We are in the crypto space, so we think it's a thing. But if you just go to a trader and try to explain him Uniswap V3, then you will realize, what is the state. And we do that every day, right? Go to new people, try to explain them these things. So you still see that it's a long way to go, and we should focus more on adoption and the freedom and benefit to people right now. But I think in the long term, whoever is the leader will definitely have the first say on who's running that.
Already seeing that. You're seeing that in the CoinGecko first quarter report. You've seen that in all the DApp radar reports that Asia and Europe are booming as far as gaming is concerned. And you said you're on the bridge there, or the cusp of the bridge of gamification and exchanges, right? Do you think are possible now with your exchange and these, the growth in the growing sectors of the crypto economy?
By purpose, we didn't want to restrict us only on the crypto community. So we really want to bring crypto actually to gaming with gamification elements, but as well with actual gaming offerings on the exchange, but also integrating our exchange outside in gaming companies and platforms. And this merge and looking to other areas and to other growing areas, this will also be good for the crypto industry, but also for other industries. And this will lead to a lot of new symbiotic offerings and to very interesting innovative elements, I think, which will come up. I mean, just to give you an example, we are talking to a game company, for example, that we will have something like a staking game directly on our exchange. I mean, still there are some uncertainties around legal questions and around questions around is this from a gaming perspective possible? But with this element, you can see that I think a lot of innovation will happen if a market is kind of saturated or is in a consolidation phase. Some players are aiming to differentiate themselves in an interesting way, are interested as well to collaborate with different and new players, and this normally always leads to one or the other innovative elements. That's how I see it. Yeah, more collaboration, more cross the fence thinking, and I think this will be good overall. Yeah, it'll lead to new innovations.
Right. So let's talk about that. In the early 1920s in the U.S., they created something called the air conditioner, right? And from there, you had all kinds of industries. You had not just the main industry of creating the air conditioner, but you had refrigeration, you had gasoline, you had all kinds of things that were corresponding support sectors, right? And you don't have that right now in crypto, right? How do we get there? How do we navigate that challenge and some other challenges too, collectively and collaboratively, so that we can build support structures around the industry?
So I think that's exactly what's happening. You can't imagine how many emails I'm getting per day from companies which are reaching out, which are doing exactly these things, like building infrastructure around crypto, like on the marketing side of things, but also on the exchange infrastructure side of things, on being it development offerings, being it completely product outsourcing offerings or product development offerings. So I think there's a lot of development on the infrastructure side, which is a little bit under the radar. I witnessed that a lot because I get approached proactively by so many projects doing their business development and product fine tuning. Let's put it that way. So I think there's a lot happening in this respect, and a lot of small, medium-sized companies are finding their way. Let's put it that way. On the infrastructure side of things in the industry, I see a lot of development there. Yeah, and you also see more traditional players like smaller banks tapping in areas like being a liquidity provider, or buying up a crypto liquidity provider which is in trouble, for example, and adopting this to their normal traditional business. Yeah, and so I think, and this also comes a little bit with the thoughts I shared around consolidation and collaboration. This is exactly what I'm seeing right now in the industry.
So let's talk about the Constitution, right? A lot of people say, in the U.S., especially U.S. has a Constitution. Oh, if it's not directly written in the Constitution, then it's not a really rule. But the Constitution, has been a living, breathing document for a few hundred years, that it's not just its original words by the founders of the country. It actually includes case law, right? Case law, which I guess are equivalent of coding by decision by one-offs, right? How do you incorporate these one-offs, these case, situations to the code or by judgment to your platform and what you do?
So I think first of all, the Q Constitution, or what we call a constitution, is a little different from the Constitution of the United States in that it is a private contract between all stakeholders and all Q token holders, all the members of the community of the Q ecosystem. So it's a private contract, and like a normal nation state constitution, like the one of the US, that assumes there is a whole body of government judges, like a judiciary, an executive body, and so forth, in order for those rules to be interpreted. That's then the case law, and be complied with or executed or enforced, which is then done by the executive. So we don't have that, but we're trying to create something similar in that we're thinking about it more in terms of private contracts between a huge number of members. That could be members of a DAO, That could be like owners of a protocol. That could be all kinds of communities could have those rules as private contracts amongst all of themselves, and saying like, we commit to abiding to the following principles and whatnot. So I think that's one. So the second thing is, how do you deal with case law? Then is it becomes much easier if you have a one-to-one situation, because any kind of dispute will only appear at the face of it, will only appear between two parties that are in that dispute. And then the community, however, might decide over time that, well, we want to benefit from previous discussions or previous cases, and they might ask everybody to make public those cases, which in private arbitration is not necessarily the case. And also the community could decide, we want for those past cases to be taken into account in new decisions, which is essentially then saying like, we're taking into account case law. I'm not so sure whether that would be a good idea. I think that really will depend on the type of community, when in the growth phases of a project, what you think about it, because there's always a flip side to that coin. So case law is great, but it's very difficult to establish early on, and there need then to be rules how to interpret and apply case law. Is it binary? Is it, whenever there's been a case, then how do you change over time? I think that's something that always I found to be very, very critical in everything you do, because if there's only one constant, it's change, right? So we have to have very transparent and clear ideas and mechanisms on how to change, even like a constitution, because we will need to be able to adapt it. It's the same like with code. And what we've talked about earlier, if you need to have very good decentralized mechanisms to upgrade code, otherwise you're stuck with what you have in the beginning. And for some very simple business models or very rigid, that might be a good thing, but for most, it's not.
You said a word early on in your answer, and I want to ask you about this. I think you have it in place. Is arbitration, right? How does your arbitration work?
So the ICC Court of Arbitration, as I said, the biggest in the world, is plugged into the Q system, in that they looked at the constitution, they looked at the contract, and they said like, well, we would be fine taking and accepting any dispute that arises out of that contract. So if there are parties to that contract, like Q community members or stakeholders of Q, that have a conflict or a dispute, they said we would claim jurisdiction and say like, yeah, you can come and we will find an answer to that. So they have a full due process in place. They have there are arbitrators that are available and so forth. So if there was a conflict, let's say over the slashing, the validator would go and say like, the slashing was not justified, it was too much or not at all, whatever. And they would take that to the ICC. So they would go to the ICC, say like, this is what happened, this is the contract, this is the situation. And then the root nodes will send a, like one of the root nodes will go and they will have this arbitration. And then they will accept the arbitration, because in the contract already, they said like, whenever there's a dispute and we go before the ICC Court of Arbitration, we will accept their judgment. And then that judgment will be taken and will be executed on chain or off chain, depending on what the outcome is.